I'm fond of using a metaphor to point to what we've been discussing so far. The spiritual being, the infinite being that you really are, is what I compare to the sun. And when we think of the sun, we typically think of huge amounts of energy and power and light. So it's a great metaphor for an infinite being and a spiritual being. Now, in order to come here and play the human game and have the phase 1 experience that I just described, it's the equivalent of a very solid, dense layer of cloud cover being put in front of the sun. And if you look at this image, you can see that there's no trace of the sun at all. It appears to be completely gone. And if you've ever had an experience where you're on a beach, perhaps suntanning in a chaise lounge, and you can feel the warmth and the heat and the intensity of the sun on your face and your body, and it's warm, and then a layer of clouds rolls in, and it noticeably becomes darker and cooler, and that intensity disappears. So you know what I mean, and you know why this is such a beautiful metaphor, although I'm going to continue to discuss this in some slightly different ways. So in order to convince ourselves that we're the opposite of who we really are, and this playing field, this Earth amusement park, so-called, is real, and there's power outside and all the things that I talked about, it's the equivalent of a very solid layer of cloud cover being put into place. Now, clouds, as you know, are wispy and smoky and not real solid or tangible. You could put your hands through them even though they can block the sunshine. But I want you to imagine that this layer of cloud cover is solid and dense, like steel or titanium or diamonds. Very solid, very dense, very thick, blocking the metaphorical rays, light, energy, heat, and power of the sun of who you really are. Another way that you could look at this would be of an eclipse. You can see right now that the sun, the light, the power, and the energy is being blocked. And it isn't really going anywhere, as we'll discuss in a minute, but it's no longer there. It's being blocked by something very solid, very dense, very physical, very thick. Similar kind of an idea, different example. Now, I love the metaphor of sun and clouds, or the secondary metaphor I shared with you of eclipse of the sun. For lots of reasons. It tracks so well and is so beautifully supportive for our purposes here and for the teachings that I'm sharing with you here. One of the things that's most important about it that I really want to hammer home right now is this. If the clouds are blocking the sun to one degree or another, does the sun go away? Does the sun disappear? Does the sun cease to exist? No. It's still there. It's got just as much heat and power and energy and light. It's just that our experience of it is blocked. If it's nighttime, similarly, is the sun gone? Has something happened to its basic power, light, heat, and energy? No. We just aren't experiencing it, but it's still there. It's just sitting there. It's always there. It never goes anywhere. It never changes. It doesn't suddenly become less powerful or illumined or whatever it is. It's just our experience of it. It always stays the same. And it doesn't care if it's cloudy or there's an eclipse or it's raining or anything that it shines on. The sun doesn't care. It just shines. It just is what it is. Same thing with the eclipse. If an eclipse is blocking the sun, it's just blocking our experience of it, but nothing has changed essentially in the sun. The same thing is true about you and me and all the other people that we see that you now are looking at, maybe, as players of the human game in this extraordinary adventure that we're all having here. It seems like it, but the natural state that I've talked about, it didn't go anywhere. It can't go anywhere. We can't really lose it, just like the sun never changes. It's always there, the natural state of who we really are, the infiniteness of who we really are. It's just blocked from our experience. It isn't anything you have to create. It isn't anything you have to evolve into. It isn't anything you have to earn the right to have or expand to be able to experience, even though I personally have used that word expand a lot in a different kind of a context, just as an arbitrary label like the others I've used with you. It's always there. It's always just as infinitely powerful, wise, abundant, and joyful. It's just that by design, our experience of it has been blocked. So the key is not to somehow get all these things that are part of the natural state. It's to remove the block. To keep yourself away from the sun of who you really are, from the truth with a capital T, in phase 1, using another metaphor, an elaborate security system had to be created. Now, you may look at this image and laugh and say, boy, that person's really paranoid. That person's really fearful, whatever. But to keep us away from the truth and a direct experience of the infiniteness of who we really are, we really had to do something like that to keep ourselves away from it. Even if we discover it in a teaching, even if we become consciously aware of it, to keep ourselves away from an actual experience of it, there had to be a very sophisticated, multi-layer security system that would keep us away from a direct experience of it. But what I discovered, and what I can help you to do, is that that security system can be unlocked and disabled, giving you access once again to the truth with a capital T and the experience of the natural state. Now, we've been talking about phase 1 of the human game. What I discovered on my rather unique journey in this life is that there's actually a phase 2 and a phase 3 of the human game as well. Okay, so what's phase 2 and what's phase 3? Well, first, let's hammer down once again, just so we can have a sequence here, a flow here. Phase 1 is building the cloud cover, locking it in, making it more and more dense, and convincing yourself that you, as the player, are the opposite of who you really are, and that this illusory playing field that we call the physical universe, three-dimensional reality, the earth, space, everything that, all the stuff we talk about and study, even in metaphysical things, in what we would call the visible world and the invisible world, that all of that is real, and to one degree or another has power over us or can, within the dynamics of phase 1. So that's what phase 1 is about. Forgetting the truth, building the cloud cover, locking it in, blocking our experience of our natural state of infiniteness, just to call it that, and playing within those limits and those restrictions for a while, which has what we would call positives and negatives to it. They aren't really, but we would call them positives and negatives to it. Phase 2 is going into that cloud cover and reversing the process of what was done in phase 1. So in phase 1, the cloud cover was built. It was layer after layer after layer, denser, 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 to block us off from the experience of the sun of who we really are. And so in phase 2, there's the opportunity to chip away at that cloud cover, to undermine the structural integrity of the cloud cover, to drill tunnels through it, poke holes through it, knock out chunks. Because as I mentioned, the sun is always there. The infiniteness is always there. It doesn't need to be created or manufactured or earned or anything. It's right there. So the cloud cover is blocking our experience of it. So you start poking holes in that cloud cover, you start undermining the structural integrity of the cloud cover, the sun has to shine through because it's right there. It's just blocked. And so that's what phase 2 is all about. Systematically undermining the structural integrity of the cloud cover. Drilling tunnels through it, metaphorically, poking holes in it, metaphorically, widening those holes, knocking out chunks so that more and more and more of the sun, the infiniteness, who you really are, the natural state, can shine in. And ultimately, I'm just going to use the word transform everything in a permanent, deep, and profound way. So that's what phase 2 is all about. Phase 3 then is, continuing the metaphor, playing in the sunshine. My language for this, and you have to be careful of all my language because it's just pointing to things that are ultimately indescribable. Phase 3 is about playing in the sunshine for the sheer pleasure of playing. No cloud cover in place, no limits, no restrictions except the ones that are built into a game to make it fun to play. I'll give you an example. If you choose to play the game of tennis, there are arbitrary limits and restrictions in the game of tennis. There's the net. The ball has to go over the net. There's in and there's out. You have to serve from a certain place. You can only do certain things. There are penalties and stuff, if you do things wrong or whatever. You know what I mean? But those are built into a game that we can then choose to play to have fun. A floor is theoretically a limit if you have the ability to fly or to teleport. But there are limits and restrictions, just to use those labels, that are intentionally put there, even in Phase 3, to create a game that's fun to play. So there are no artificial limits or restrictions. There are no external limits or restrictions on you in Phase 3. There's the ability to play, be anything, do anything, experience anything with rides that exist in the amusement park already, the Earth Amusement Park as I call it, or to create new rides and ride them, or ride rides that have been there in completely different ways. No limits or restrictions except the ones that are intentionally built in to make a game fun to play. I got a lot more to share about that. And playing with whatever it is for the sheer pleasure of playing. All the Phase 1 dynamics gone. No more drilling through the cloud cover. No more undermining the structural integrity. No more work. Phase 3 is all about playing for the sheer pleasure of playing. Exploring for the sheer pleasure of exploring. Expressing yourself creatively for the sheer pleasure of expressing yourself creatively. And what this experience is really like is way beyond anything that I just said or that I could describe in words. Now, on the rather unique journey and story that I call my life, I discovered how to open a portal, going back to that image that I've used and talked about many times, from Phase 1 into Phase 2, and then another portal from Phase 2 into Phase 3. And a way to systematically knock out the cloud cover and ultimately find yourself in Phase 3, playing in the sunshine, metaphorically, for the sheer pleasure of playing.